Do you feel like you're barely keeping your head above water? That no matter how hard you try, meaningful progress remains out of reach? Heather gets that. She battled an eating disorder for years before seeking help. Now in recovery, Heather is here to tell you that positive change is possible even when it doesn't feel that way. Join her as she shares openly about her struggles and small triumphs. Fair warning though, Heather doesn't hold back. Her candid story may trigger some. But for those wanting honesty, hope, and healing, this is 1% Better with Heather. The information and stories shared on 1% Better are based on host Heather's personal experiences with eating disorders and mental health challenges. Heather is not a licensed doctor, therapist, dietitian, or other health professional. Her advice and opinions should not be taken as professional medical advice. Please consult your physician or a qualified health provider regarding any medical or health-related issues. 1% Better also contains descriptions of eating disorders that may be triggering for some listeners. Discretion is advised.
Hey there, my little gaffers, and welcome to the 1% Better podcast. I'm your host, Heather, and today, I'm so excited. I got Dr. Jody Carrington with me. Hello, Dr. Jody Carrington.
Well, hello, Heather. Thank you for having me. I am so jacked to be here. I can't wait to talk about all the things.
Oh, we're going to talk about all the things and more. So I'll get you to introduce yourself, and we're going to dive right in.
Sure. Yeah. I'm Dr. Jody Carrington. I'm a clinical psychologist. I am right now at this moment on Treaty 7 land here in the center part of the province of Alberta. I've been practicing for 20 years. I do a lot of conversations. I've written 3 books. I speak all over the world about trauma and relationships and why the world is so fucked up and disconnected in this moment, and how the truth of humanity are sort of 2 things. We're wired for connection. And the hardest thing we will ever do is connect to each other. So why that's become more and more difficult these days is the thing I talk about a lot.
So first question, why is everyone so disconnected?
All right. Well, I mean, it's a small question, really. I think the truth of the matter is we're wired for it. There's, as I sort of said, there's 2 rules to this human race. And however you believe we started, right? It doesn't matter to me, like Jesus or Buddha or Yahweh or the Big Bang, or we just suddenly showed up. Humans all started in exactly the same place. And whoever made us made this first rule. We're neurobiologically wired for connection. If you disconnect from infants, they die. The second rule, just to kind of mess things up a little, is the hardest thing we will ever do is connect to each other, look at each other in the eye. And if you doubt that to be true, I mean, there's some beautiful research around just this capacity of looking at somebody you love for 4 minutes. And it is remarkably difficult to do, even to sort of glance in a room of people just to get them to look at each other. You think about what happens when you get in an elevator these days, or, where's the first place we look when we're walking down the street? We tend to not look at each other. And the hard part about that is the healthiest among us have the capacity to not only look, but to see. And the heart of all the things that matter in this world is this thing called emotional regulation, how to stay calm in times of distress. And the way you learn that, you see, is somebody has to be physically present with you to show you, not tell you. And from a neurophysiological perspective, when, you are born into this world, how you communicate with other people is you cry. You lose your friggin' mind. The job of big people, the job of, therapists, the job of teachers, the job of people sort of working in tandem with other humans is to do this thing Ram Dass said. This is a quote from a dead guy named Ram Dass that it changed everything for me as a mom and as a psychologist and as a spouse. He said, "We are all just here walking each other home." Full stop. We are all just here walking each other home. Nobody gets out of here alive. And at any given moment, we need a walker, and we are the walkie. And those of us who have had the privilege of being surrounded by people who can navigate big emotions with us, we have the capacity to give it away. We have the capacity to manage our own emotions. If that hasn't happened in our lives because of trauma or multiple generations of abuse and neglect, and there's no capacity to sort of understand that process, it becomes very difficult to manage our big emotions as we get older. And so things like eating disorders, things like personality disorders, things like fucking up every relationship you've ever had start to come into play because we lose access to the best part of ourselves. Okay. So to the core of me, I believe every human has the capacity for good. I've assessed over 1,000 of us in this country, and not one time have I met a bad human. Our ability to believe that in others has never been more compromised than it is in this moment. But I believe that of, your ex-husband. I believe that of somebody's, crotchety mother-in-law. I believe that of every person in a prison in this moment. We all have the capacity for good. What we've lost is our access to it. Because we've never been this disconnected. It's estimated that our great-grandparents looked at their children 72% more of the time than we look at our babies. Because we've never had this many exit ramps. You see, remember, the hardest thing we will ever do is look at each other. And if you think about the square footage of the house that your grandfather lived in, and the square footage of the house in which we raise our babies, what's the difference? Our accessibility to each other, to just look and to see, to eat dinner together, to play games together, to go on a walk together, to all of those things, has become significantly compromised. And as a result, we're in a loneliness epidemic, which has led very understandably to a mental health crisis.
Yeah. And everybody wants to be, and I have teenagers. I have an 18-year-old and a 14-year-old. And from the time I can remember, they're like, I want to be an influencer. I want to be a YouTube person. I want to go play video games for a job. I want to be this. Or they're not as bad as some, because I've seen way worse, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I'm like, dude, that's not life. What do you care what other people think about you?
Uh-huh.
And that's not it. And I'm not techie. I don't know how to work a computer to save my life. But do you think, well, I think a lot had to do with COVID, and we got already shrunk. And that's all there was to the outside life, was Instagram and technology to keep us connected. But then you see people popping off, and I get very, 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 very green with envy that these 18-year-olds are making gazillion dollars over on TikTok.
Oh, I know.
And I'm not.
Well, but I think part of the issue is, right, my first book was called Kids These Days. And I have to tell you, kids have never been more insightful or inclusive or curious. And we often sort of worry about them, they're so disconnected. They don't know how to do these things. They're always on their iPads. That's very, very true. Right. But I think what's true is that they not a single human doesn't want to know they matter. And the currency of today's experience is certainly about connection online and playing video games and doing all those things. Every generation that's come before us is always worried about the changes that happen because we have no script for it. Our parents didn't have a script. Maybe our grandparents didn't have a script for rock and roll. Our parents didn't have a script for weed. We don't have a script for, we're the first generation of parents that have had access to social media, right? We're worried about the kids. The kids grew up with it. We have never been this inundated or had this much access to our children. The only script we have on how to parent our kids came from our parents. And they played by a set of rules that was created for a world that no longer exists. So the kids are not the problem. It is those of us in the middle, how we need to so significantly understand how we stay emotionally regulated to stay connected to the next generation. That's going to be the key. And I think so much of this comes back to how do we regulate emotion? How do we get back to the best parts of ourselves? Because when we lose access to it, we often judge people when their lid is flipped. A psychiatrist named Dan Siegel came up with this concept that just blew me away. He said, I want you to think about when people are calm, they have access to everything they've ever learned. Okay, so their prefrontal cortex is on, which means if you think about your brain, if you're listening to us right now and you're driving, you can do this, but keep one hand on the wheel. I want you to put your thumb in the middle of your hand and wrap your fingers around your thumb. Okay, so you sort of make your thumb is on the inside, your fingers are around it. Okay, so if you take a look at that, that's a hand model of your brain. It's about the same size of the brain that's sitting in your head right now. If you flip your fingers up, in the very inner part of your brain is called your limbic system. That's where fight, flight, and freeze lives. The 3 emotional regulation strategies all of us mammals get for free. Okay. What separates humans from most other mammals is our prefrontal cortex wraps around the limbic system. And everything you've ever learned in your life lives there. How to speak a language, how to play an instrument, how to, the middle name of your mother-in-law, the first childhood phone number you ever had, everything you've ever learned lives up there. Also how to be kind, how to take a deep breath, how to understand that you matter. Anything you've ever learned lives up there. And Dan said, I want you to think about this like a lid. When your lid is on, you have access to all of those things. When you look at your own personal children and they are making good choices and they are being kind to their siblings and you're proud of them, their lid is on. If you've ever went on a second date in your life, you went on that second date because your prospective partner's lid was on. Huh? Have you ever heard this? He's flipped his lid. He's lost his friggin' mind. Yeah? We do that all the time. When you bring a baby home from the hospital, how do they let you know what they need? They cry. They flip their lid. The job of big people, the job of partners, the job of therapists is to put that lid back on. Because we were never meant to do this alone. And when we are neurobiologically wired for this, when a crying infant is placed in any one of our arms, regardless of age, race, religion, socioeconomic status, or gender identity, we engage in a rhythmic exchange in an effort to walk that baby home, to get that lid back on. And if you are surrounded by enough big people when you're an infant that have the capacity to regulate you, you start to learn how to do that on your own. If you're surrounded by people who don't, who say, shut up, you're an idiot, get to your fucking room, then all you have to give away is that capacity. If you have traumatic experiences throughout your life, right? Really core traumatic stuff, like any sort of form of abuse, it becomes very difficult to keep your lid on because you're always in a state of heightened arousal. So your ability to then handle the really hard, difficult stuff becomes significantly compromised. Okay. When your lid is on, you have access to everything. When your lid isn't, you are not teachable. You don't have, not that you don't want to learn, but you can't. You are also unreasonable. You can't, logistics are gone. And we try to teach or have conversations with people when their lid is flipped. And the first order of business is often to get that lid back on, which requires connection, which requires no judgment, which is requiring a little bit of like, okay, look at me. It's okay. And you see, it requires often, this is what usually helps too, is to take a drink of water. You can't chew and swallow with a flip lid, neurobiologically impossible, which is why it's often interesting, the connection between eating disorders and emotional dysregulation, because there's lots of connection there, lots of disconnection there, if you will. And the idea is, how do we surround ourselves with or understand what it takes to get our bodies in this state of emotional regulation? And we don't come from a generation, see, where you reward people who are not being good. The idea is you make good choices and then I reward you. But we are playing by a set of rules that was established for a world that no longer exists. I have to collect you before I direct you because we're in such a state of disconnection right now. Does that make sense?
Yep. Yeah. And I'm like totally disconnected. My lid's on a whole nother planet and I live in fight or flight. And I just learned like last year that that's not normal. And I'm 45. So I'm like, oh, well, that explains a lot.
But doesn't it, Heather, right? So when you have access to your good, right? When you think about being, if you can just pull in your memory, like a time where somebody was lucky because you were in their lives, a moment where you made a difference in somebody's world. That's where you have access to your good. That's who you are. And oftentimes when we find ourselves in compromising positions, saying things that we don't mean, making our bodies sick, eating excessively, we're in a state of disconnection. We lose, not that you don't have the capacity, but you lose access to it. And so the question oftentimes in therapy, or the question for our own selves, is really like, how can we get there? Why does it feel safer in a state of lid flip than it does with our lid back on? And can we start to then retell the story to our body that in this moment you are now safe? Which then, when our lid is on, we have access to all the things, all the treatment and the training and the insights, that you've done so hard to do the work around. But here's the thing, we will all always flip our lids. It's neurobiologically important that we do that. For example, if you're like out frolicking in the greater Vancouver area and your lid is on and out jumps a bear, right? I don't want your lid to stay on. I don't want you to be like, holy shit, that's a big, I wonder if that's a brown bear. I want you to flip that thing out of the way and fucking run, right? You're going to run, fight, or fly. Hopefully you're not going to fight because you're not that good. So when scary things happen all the time, your lid is supposed to flip all the time. Our idea is if you have had a story in your bones that this world is a scary place, that nobody's going to get you, that you're not worth it, that you have to be on guard all the time, it becomes very difficult for your body to believe that it's safe to put the lid back on. Because Bessel van der Kolk talks about this. He's one of my favorite heroes in the world of trauma. He said he's written a book called The Body Keeps the Score. So no matter what you do to talk about things up here, your body keeps the score. And so certain sounds or smells, even times of year, will get you into that state of lid flip where you're like, fucking watch it. Like, look out. And our job, the work, is how do we just regulate, reconnect to our body and our people so that we have the capacity to keep this access to the good.
Yeah. It makes a lot of sense, right? Like, I know why I got my bulimia and anorexia. I was in a horrible workplace accident. I got blown up. I'm not even making that up. And it's been 8 years now of just constant fighting with my work and WCB and everything else, and just trauma. And it just, so I know where that one came from.
Mm-hmm.
And it's taken me this long to figure it out that there's nothing I can do with it. I'm talking to morons, right? And they're going to say moronic stuff, but my response to it, I can somewhat control, right?
Yeah,
like
100%.
Try to get a whole handle on it, right?
Right.
But that explains a lot why a lot of people go and do certain things, why people become drinkers, why people start doing drugs, why people do other things that are not conducive to their life.
100%. When reality doesn't feel safe, or when you don't feel competent or confident, you will do your best to numb. And the hard part about numbing is that you can't do that selectively. I wish you could just numb the pain. I wish you could just numb the trauma, the feeling that they didn't get you, that they question your legitimacy, your contribution to their organization, whatever that is, yeah? Or, your role as a mother or a wife or whatever starts to sort of eat at you in that space. And I think the hard part about numbing, right, is that you then also numb all the joy. And you numb the capacity to heal and to find the good stuff too. And so oftentimes numbing works for a short period of time because it keeps you sort of in this space where you don't have to feel all the bad stuff. It will then rob you of everything else, which is then why we see mental health issues come into play, right? Anxiety and depression and all of those things that tend to come with, psychiatric conditions where we're like, oh God, now we got them all. They tend to be in response to the underlying condition, which is I don't feel like I have the capacity to stay regulated because in my regulated place, it's too scary.
Yeah, well, you're preaching to the choir.
Yeah, right?
Yeah, all that, right?
Yeah.
And whole lot of crazy going on over here. And
and I think that's, and in all fairness, I mean, I think there's a whole lot of crazy for all of us these days. And, you had sort of said with respect to the pandemic and, I think that we were headed in this place because technological advances has far outraced us in the evolution, right? It's sort of come to this place where we're now here and we can't catch up to it so fast, right? Our bodies are not prepared for all the inundation of data that has happened again and again and again. And so then what happens there is then we just get to this place where we're just overwhelmed. And then the pandemic came and it said, for 3 years, For the physical safety of your communities, you need to separate from each other, from your families and from funerals and from weddings and from the things that will allow your bodies to heal. We have to keep you apart from each other. And we will pay the price. We will witness the price of the pandemic, despite the fact that we think it's over now, for the remainder of our lifetimes. In the sense of watching, the dysregulated places that so many of us get to. And I think the hard part about this is then it's like, so what do we do about it now? Right? Which is the question where we all ask each other, hey, what do you think about that?
What do we all do about it?
Yeah, like that's the question, isn't it?
I think we're going to be studied for centuries of this 3 years of being like we're pods, we're mammals, we're pack people, like we're meant to be in packs. And like you're saying, you're taking every joy. You should just start building asylums because, like you've tried to make people, like a whole world, go insane.
Yeah. And the issue is there wasn't an intention there, right? It was a response to, the intention wasn't to create insanity. The response, again, when there was no script to it, is how do we keep people safe, right? And I think that in the moment, this often happens. We don't think about the ramifications of. We just think about how do we stop this thing that is threatening the physical health of so many people, right? That we're watching people die and we're watching, and I think that it's understandable in terms of how we got there, right? The issue is, what do we do now in terms of, a pretty significant piece of the next generation that has lost access to the skill building of, navigating breakups and the first year of university and, how to have conversations with each other. And, from an occupational perspective, I mean, we created a space where people work from home, which is so helpful in some situations. However, I think the greatest impact for many organizations will have their people come back to work, or at least in some hybrid situation, because we need each other. You can't tell the next generation of leaders how to lead or how to fire somebody or conduct a meeting. You have to show them. And you can't tell them how to do that on a Zoom meeting. You have to show them. There is a complete different response physiologically when we're in the same room together. If we did this podcast together in the same room, there would be a difference because of our cortisol responses and our dopamine and our serotonin that you just can't replicate on a Zoom. Now, because of technological advances, we can do this in 2 completely different provinces. I mean, I have meetings like this all over the world. I hope because of technological advances, we'll find a cure for pancreatic cancer. Because of technological advances, we've been able to do so many wonderful things. It's not the problem. Technological advances, AI is not the problem, but the true AI will always be this: authentic interaction. You will never automate connection. And so the issue is, we have to do that on purpose, because if we allow the world to do it on its own, we're going to get more savvy and tech savvy, and the big corporates of, Facebook and Instagram and all those things. I mean, they want us there. They want us there. They want us to consume information in that way. Not because it's wrong necessarily, but because it's working so effectively well. So on purpose, we have to do this thing that's always been so hard to do, which is look at each other on purpose, right? Go for walks, go for the dates, play the cards with your kids. Don't charge your phone by your bed. Try to give your body a little reprieve in the morning and at the night, that you don't have to be constantly connected to other people's highlight reel. So a few of the things that I think matter, I mean, if I were just to give you like 3 things that I think about all the time, it's not charging your phone by your bed. It's driving at least once a week in silence and see what happens, right? No inundation of data or podcasts or music. Just listen. Just be calm. Just be still. And the third thing that I think is so critically important is really do your very best to wave at your neighbors like you've been drinking. If you can try those 3 things in the next week, you will notice such a significant shift. This isn't hard to do, you see. It feels overwhelming when we look at the data, the loneliness epidemic, the fact that like 1 in every 2 kids would say they've never felt so unseen. in the past week, they don't think that anybody cares about them, right? Like, this is Canadian data, right? And coming back from that isn't as hard as it isn't as big as the problem feels, because no major institution is going to implement changes that's going to change everything in our lifetime. It's actually you and me doing the next best right kind thing. Waving at our neighbors, having dinner with our kids, giving people a compliment, particularly the ones that don't seem to deserve it. The ones who need it the most are the hardest to give it to.
Yeah, it's funny because, if I was in silence in my car, you'd hear me a lot clearer. I'm loud on a good day, man. All the drivers would hear me, so it's probably not safe for me. But when I picked up my son yesterday, who's 14, and it's funny that you talk about this, because I'm like, who'd you see? What did you do? What's going on, right? And because that's our quiet. We just talk. Like, there's no radio. It's just me and him on the half an hour drive home.
Yeah.
And me yelling at other people in the car. And he says, Mom, I saw this video. And I was like, uh-oh, what'd you see? And he's like, it's kind of dark, right? Like, this kid was being teased. He was going to go do something horribly wrong that goes on in the States. And he's like, one nice person took him in because he was living on the streets, and that changed him around, and it didn't happen. He's like, this really happened, Mom. Whether it did, it didn't, I don't know, but it's a really good story. Yeah. And he said, so my job is to be nice to everybody. And I was like, there, I did something good. Like, if I ever thought I failed as a mom, damn it, that one got me a prize, I think.
No
right?
kidding.
I'm like, yeah, buddy, like, talk to the people, hold the door. Like, I do know all my neighbors, and I'm pretty chatty. But yeah, it's really easy. And especially if we're in our addiction, right? In our ED or whatever your vice is, right?
Yeah.
It wants us to be solitary. It doesn't want us to go outside and see the people, right? It's our own little dirty secret. And pushing yourself out of that's really, really, really hard.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, and I think that's the point, right? Like, I think it gets overwhelming when we think that we have to do it, and it's a big deal, and like right now. And I think, again, the answer to so much of this is just next best right kind thing. You don't have to do the 180. We're not that good, right? We won't, but it takes relatively small, little tiny pieces all strung together that where we find the joy. And joy is the most vulnerable emotion on the planet. Oftentimes people think it's shame. Like, when you think about what emotion are you feeling when you're at your most vulnerable? And people always go to shame and sadness or fear, but it's actually joy. And I often ask people, when is the last time you belly laughed with your babies or danced in your kitchen? And in those spaces, see, there's no defenses left. When you're being silly, when you allow yourself to sink in and see other people, you have access to your good. There's no question about it. And you're completely disarmed. And what so many of us have lost, you see, is joy. And she's everywhere, but you got to find her, right? Because typically speaking, we come home and we're like, oh my God, this house is so messy. I can't have people over. Jesus Christ, what are they going to think about me? And versus like, yeah, come on in. Right? Let's sit down and like, what do I got in the fridge here? Let's have some hummus. Huh? Versus like, I got to have a charcuterie board prepared, and we got to have matching napkins, and everybody's got to figure this shit, and we got to take a picture. God knows the phone's got to eat before we do. Right?
Yeah.
And versus fuck it. Let's just, this spontaneity of just enjoying the company of another human being is becoming so curated, right? I think about this all the time, growing up, even like people would just be stopping by for coffee. Or, if somebody died up the road, you didn't have the capacity to call and check. You just went.
Yep.
But now so many of us are mortified if somebody just shows up. We're like, hey, what the, call before you come, do all this, which I understand, in terms of our inundation of data and people in this world. We want also our ability to just be kind or quiet. But it's sort of this interesting space where like we will always need each other. And we lose our scripts around just like, yes, let's go for dinner. Yes, let's go for coffee. Yes, let's have friends over on the weekend. And I think that's so interestingly understandable that we don't want people, because we spend all day watching other people on social media, listening to other people. And listen, our kids have never had this much access to us. I mean, if I needed to talk to my mom in the run of a school day, for sure I could go to the office and call home, but like somebody better be dead, right? Like somebody's got to have a massive injury. Now, our kids all carry typically, many of them, devices in which they can connect to us anytime. Mm-hmm. This is also true of our parents. We're in this generation where we're new to social media, and our parents can get us anytime we want. My dad knows I'm going on stage yesterday. He's in the middle stages of dementia, and he can call me instantly, which is beautiful in so many ways. But he's like, I don't understand. How do you get the Masters, the golf thing on your phone? Holy fuck. Like, I think he's dying. Like, are you okay? What's happening? Now I'm thinking about, why is he trying to get this? Where is his partner? Where is my brother even? Fuck me. So all of that stuff has happened. And then I try to go do my job. And when I'm doing my job, I'm watching the people. Oh, they're not responding well to this. Or like, this kid just tells me this, or this human just said, holy fuck. And I'm holding this. And then I get home and I'm supposed to just love my own kids and sink into my marriage to make that great so that everything doesn't fall apart. Well, guess what? I don't have a fucking thing left. So then we just want to numb on Netflix, and we wonder then why, or some crime scene documentary, which typically makes us so relaxed. I mean, like right. That's the number one downloaded podcast, right? You and I both have a podcast, so I'm often watching, where we land in the realm of podcastery. And I mean, I think my podcast called Everyone Comes From Somewhere is fucking amazing. It's done very, very well. I will never beat the crimes drama. I'm like, there's nothing about how do we be better humans that is sexier than we think that somebody got her in the middle of the night, but we don't know. Like, that's what we want to hear, right? And so it's so fascinating to me that we are constantly inundated by data that doesn't allow our bodies to be still or to rest. And if you've ever seen a toddler miss a nap, you know that they become quickly assholery-ish.
Yes.
We are a whole community full of people that have missed their naps. And so the ability to be kind and nice and connected and just wonder about another person's experience has become significantly compromised. There's nothing wrong with us. Our access to the good has been compromised.
Yeah. And it's so true. And I'm sorry about your dad, going through all that. I am in the same boat as you. I was with my dad on Tuesday because he can't be left alone. And that was an adventure. And so I speak your language, my friend. Mm-hmm. And yeah, like I get it. Like it's so much. I can't do the crime scene thing. I already got enough PTSD. I don't need more. And
yeah.
It's so much. And I say that all the time. Like, when's the last time that you've listened to somebody? Like, really listened? And I say it all the time. Listen to the whispers because you'll never hear the screams.
That's such a good line. Yeah.
And not everybody has somebody to reach out to. And I was going to bring up your podcast, Everyone Comes From Somewhere, which I love. Right? Because, yeah, we all just want to be heard. We want to be heard.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
yeah. And the last book that I wrote is called Feeling Seen. And I think it's the answer to this disconnected world. If you have ever been in a place where somebody has made you feel seen, and the definition of that is, it's often written without words. It often comes without sound. It's this deep knowing that somebody gets you, that you feel got. Huh? And it's often interesting when you just do the opposite of that. Like if you can give me the amount of times where somebody didn't get you, where it was like you were screaming and they had headphones on, or like you were like, this is so blatantly obvious. It is your truth. And they're like, That's the definition of feeling unseen. And the more disconnected we become, the harder it is to see other people, right? So this feeling of being seen, of being understood, of being acknowledged is truly the only thing that we will need as human beings to be healthy. And we're losing not our ability to do it, but access to it. And the more we then, so it's nobody else's fault, which is the hard part. It was so much easier to be like, oh my God, the government or my supervisor or the president or the CEO or the boss or the leader or this principal, fucking asshole. Could be true. All of that could be true. But where it often lands is in our capacity to regulate, to get back to the good in us. And if there is a whole marred history there of things that would suggest to your body it's not okay to be there, then that's where we start. Because even if I change the superintendent or the government or the boss or the CEO, your body's still in a state of fight or flight. We don't serve, it doesn't serve, right? You often ask, when somebody's lost a child or, if you get revenge, if the ex who blew up your family, finally then gets what they deserve, it often doesn't change the way we feel in our system. It might be good for a moment. We're like, but the underlying truth of the emotional regulation in your own body, access to your good, that's the effort. That's the focus. That's the necessary place we all end up if we want to live in this world where we find joy, where we understand our purpose, where we have insight and creativity and productivity and all of those things, right? It's when we have access to our good. The rest don't score.
Yeah, and I always say you got to be your own cheerleader, and it sucks being on a team for one, but damn it, you're the only one you're stuck with you. Like,
yeah, you're going to wake up with you for the rest of your life.
Right.
Listen, I say this all the time too. Like, I think I'm a fucking riot. Like, I love waking up with me every day because it's a good time. I mean, up in here, it is a good time. And I think so many people don't. In fact, like 2% of all women would look in the mirror and describe themselves as beautiful. Very few of us can talk about why people in our world are lucky to have us. Very few of us have the ability to say, here's what's great about me without providing some caveat to that, right? The crazy is really bad or, like, oh, this comes with a whole lot. And no, okay. But also the capacity to think about all the things that we do bring is such important work. Because it's so hard to stay there. It's so hard to get there, first of all. And when you can do that, when you can practice that a little bit more, it's then easier to get back there, right? In that state where your shoulders are dropped, where your jaw is relaxed, your tongue is not slammed to the roof of your mouth, right? It's relaxed. You can wiggle your toes. You can let your gut out. That's emotional regulation. That's a state of calm. And oftentimes, I promise you this, now after you listen to this episode, every time you think about this episode, I want you to think about the shoulders, okay? Because we spend a lot of time with our shoulders like this.
And I'm trying so hard, man.
I know. You almost got to unglue them, right? Because if you write the word shoulders on your bathroom mirror, like on a sticky note in your bathroom mirror, put it in your car, put it even a reminder in your phone. I promise you, every time you see that word, your shoulders are here. Because we are much better at preparing for the fight than we are settling in to the relief of it all. And the body keeps the score. Oftentimes in many of our lives, they're right? We have our jobs to worry about, our parents to worry about, our children to worry about, our finances to worry about, our mental health to worry about. Fuck, did we marry the right person? What did we eat today? Fuck you, fatty. Like all of those things that happen in our head does not result in our body going, oh God, this just feels so good to be here.
This sounds like fun. Right?
Yes, I'm so,
right?
We spend a lot of like this. So the antithesis to this is to just draw some attention to that space and be like, in this moment, what do I have? We're sitting here doing this beautiful podcast. We have the opportunity to do this in this privileged place. What a gift this is. Can I just get my body back here and remind her she's safe? That work has to be done on purpose. That reconnection has to be done on purpose because if left to our own devices, we will be ready for the fight. Because we come from multiple generations who had to be, right? Mm-hmm. And we're just playing by a different set of rules now. And if I were to come up with those new set of rules in a sentence, it would sound like this. Be kind and don't tolerate bullshit in that order.
I like it. I like the rules. Short and simple. Yeah, I like it. Right? Yeah, but I'm trying so hard, man. But I have crappy posture too. So there's my defense.
And it doesn't even matter, right? Like, I think it's like, watch your jawline. And I think that's often particularly those of us who have, disordered eating in our history. Like this.
I'm happy.
Yeah.
Can't you see?
So fucking good. And so just even drawing attention to that every once in a while, just checking in on that. right? And when the babies walk through the door, or when you're in the presence of a physician, or when you, like, whoever you feel is sort of like, when I promise you, if I say, I don't know what it is, but the name of the company you worked for, this happens like this, right? And so it's like, they're just a company. They do not have that much power, right? And so when we pair those two things, right, in that moment, it's a little bit of undoing that is necessary in order to keep that body in a place where it can process stuff. Because it's very difficult to process any emotion when we're like this.
Yep.
Hey, you would know.
And it takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of time.
Doesn't it?
It takes a lot of time, man.
Yes.
But
yes.
oh my gosh, I could talk to you for hours. You are amazing, my friend.
Thank you. I'm so glad.
I love you. I think you're like great.
I think you're great too. This worked out good.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yes, you're doing amazing. I think, Heather, I think just giving a place for people to have these hard conversations, which I know is why you started this podcast, is I think the greatest gift you can give to the people in your community, because we only get the highlight reels, and there's very few spaces that talk about the real hard things without like, this is fucked. Everybody's fucked. We're all in a big fucking state of crisis. It's not true. We are going to be okay. We just need to do it together, because we weren't meant to do any of this alone.
Yeah. Well, see, now I want to ask, I don't even know if it's going to be, I don't want to take up too much of your time, but I kind of just wanted to touch on what I'm seeing a lot now with when you're saying like calm, 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 and people in their affirmations and talking to mirror, which I'm uncomfortable with, but that's me. Yeah. And this rise of body dysmorphia, right? And I think a lot comes from social media, but are you seeing that like with self-love, body dysmorphia, affirmations? I just feel like it's all this big whirlwind right now.
Yeah, like I think body dysmorphia is really an indication of a disconnect between the head and the heart. Okay. And so you can affirm all you want. You can be like, I'm beautiful. I love everything. If you are not in a state of regulation when you do that, it's a waste of time. So it's not just about the affirmation. It's certainly much more about the neurophysiology that happens when you do that. You can do all the yoga, drink all the fucking kale you want. If you're doing that and your shoulders are up and you doubt every piece of it, waste of time. This kindness to your own body first, and then not tolerating bullshit in that order, right? It doesn't mean that everything's fucking roses and all those things, right? Like there'll also be a time where that's enough. Stop it. We need limits, boundaries, all of those things. But the idea to regulate first is so critically important. And oftentimes just even, affirming or looking at yourself in a mirror, if it just gets you in such a heightened state of arousal, it's not that good. I want you to be able to be like, drop those shoulders, settle into this body. You believe that to be true. And then you start to find the best things about you, right? And just see how it feels. If it doesn't feel okay, then that's okay. Just notice that, right? There's no amount of looking at yourself in the mirror and being like, you're beautiful, and you going like, fuck you. No, really, right. You are. Fuck you. Like, yeah. Do you know, like at what point is that helpful to anybody? Right. It's not, right? Versus this capacity of like, what's getting in the way, mama? Right? Give me a time. Think about her as a mom. Think about her when she's really done something well with that boy. Then I want you to look in the mirror, right? Just look at that mom for a minute. And then you tell her she's crushing it. And then that's good. Do you understand the difference between trying to force that into a body that is not prepared to take it in versus getting yourself into that place? Because she is beautiful. She is amazing. She's all those things. If I asked anybody else in her world, they would see something very different, which is where the dysmorphia comes into play.
Yeah. Oh man, now I need you to come back, and you're coming to Vancouver, so you might find some blonde girls stalking you tomorrow. I'll find you, trust me.
Oh,
I know everybody.
I believe you. I believe
you. Well, my friend, and I hate wrapping this up, but we got to, so I need you to come back whenever you are, not busy.
I would love it.
Whenever you got, a spare 2 seconds. Where can everyone find you?
Oh my goodness. drjodycarrington.com is our website. And then I hang out a lot on Instagram. Instagram is where I do like, oh gosh, I have workshops and 3 books, and I would love your community to be a part of ours. So you can find us lots of places.
I'm all about building a bridge to another village, man. Everyone needs a village, and you just hop along. right?
That's right. That's beautiful. I love that too.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I can't thank you enough.
Oh, thanks, Heather.
That's all for this episode of 1% Better. To continue the conversation, head over to our website at www.1percentbetter.ca, where you can access more stories and resources. We'd also love it if you subscribed and left us a review on your favorite podcast platform. And remember, friends, progress takes patience, perspective, and sometimes a little help from people who get it. So be kind to yourself and others as we work to get 1% better every day. We'll see you back here next week.